It is our privilege to welcome back the Surgeon General from the state of Florida, Dr. Joseph Ladapo. He received his MD from Harvard University as well as a PhD in health policy. He has spoken with us before, and he has been spot on with pretty much all of his instincts. His latest book, Transcend Fear, A Blueprint for Mindful Leadership in Public Health. And boy, I could not agree more with the fact that fear is not a public health instrument. In fact, it is a way to damage the public health. So we are going to get into it with Dr. Ladapo today. We are out on the Restream, Rumble Rants, and the Twitter Spaces. Sometimes we have time for calls. Hopefully we'll do that. Dr. Ladapo, in addition to being Surgeon General for the state of Florida, is a professor at University of Florida College of Medicine. He received his in general internal medicine and health policy at the Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA, lives in Tampa presently, and we will get into it with Dr. Ladapo after this.
Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
You can spend thousands of dollars trying to look a few years younger, or you can skip all of that hassle and go with what works. Genucel Skincare. Genucel is the secret to better skin. In fact, you might have witnessed the astonishing effects of Genucel during a recent unplanned moment on our show, when just a little Genucel XV restored my skin within minutes right before your eyes. That's how fast these products work.
I know I'm a snob about the products I use on my face. Everybody knows it. Every time I go to the dermatologist's office, they're just rows and rows of different creams. And then when I get to the counter, they're overpriced. All kinds of products that you can all find at Genucel.com.
Susan and I love Genucel so much, we've created our own bundles so you can try our favorite anti-wrinkle treatments, correcting serums, and ultra retinol creams. Just go to Genucel.com/Drew. Use the code Drew for an extra discount and free priority shipping. Again, that is Genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. And you can follow the Florida Surgeon General at FL Surgeon Gen. FL Surgeon Gen is his social media handle. The book, I want to recommend it again, Transcend Fear, A Blueprint for Mindful Leadership in Public Health. I will once again review Dr. Ladapo's pedigree, which is, again, in addition to Surgeon General, he's a professor at the University of Florida, College of Medicine, MD from Harvard University, PhD in health policy from Harvard, Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, associate professor in general internal medicine and health policy at UCLA. Excellent pedigree, and something I did not know, he was a Navy SEAL. Please welcome Dr. Joseph Ladapo.
Oh, I wasn't a Navy SEAL.
Okay.
I worked.
All right. Good. Okay. Good. It seemed too good to be true. I was about to gush all over you. I was like, dude, is there anything you can't do?
Oh man, I wish I were that
good.
cool,
all right.
But no.
All right. You're at least on planet Earth with the rest of us, because I have friends who are Navy SEALs, and these guys that's a whole different category of human being.
Yes,
but I would put you in that same category in the sense of your willingness to lead through difficult times. Now, as I recall, last time we spoke, did you do your internal medicine residency at UCLA? Is that correct?
I did it in Boston at the Beth Israel Defense Medical Center. It's one of Harvard's affiliated hospitals.
Harvard School. And then you came over to UCLA. And the part I want to discuss is that community gave you a ration of grief. I don't really know what happened. My guess is that you started speaking about the insanity of some of the policies and what just asking questions, which of course was considered somehow anathema to being a good physician, which is, again, this is the bizarre time we went through. What happened there, number one? And number two, given Florida's numbers through the pandemic and your leadership through the pandemic, Is anybody giving you any apologies, for Christ's sake? Is anybody saying, I'm sorry, I maybe I misjudged, or I was a little too harsh? Anything like that happening?
Well, first, I really have to thank Governor Ron DeSantis and that man, because if it weren't for the leadership he exhibited, we would never have left California. I would still be, I'd be a professor at UCLA, and we'd be living in West LA, and it was the call from his office and his, like, you remember how, I mean, that guy, they were trying to, take him out with their words and their use or really misuse of data to really disparage his decisions in terms of letting people make their own decisions and live their lives, and not just live in the name of COVID-19 virus regulations. So, I'm happy to have been able to work with him, and we've continued together to do a lot more good stuff. And it's, you're right. Like, we said healthy kids don't need these completely new experimental mRNA COVID-19 vaccines that we're still learning about. And, most of the world, at least the scientific community with access to the media, lost their tops. And look now, like, no one's pushing them hardly on kids, and parents have clearly said no. But no apologies have come. It's just, one thing or the other, the masking of the kids, everything. It's sad. You don't hear any apologies, or really an acknowledgement of where people made mistakes in terms of judgment and in terms of interpretation of data. And you hear none of that, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you were still in Los Angeles at this time, but I was on the air doing a local show here on a local Fox affiliate, trying to keep people updated on what was going on. And we brought in a school board member the day they decided to close the schools. And I found the footage of this, and I'm asking this guy, I'm like, who told you to close schools? What consultant, what infectious disease expert, where did you get this idea from that it's the right thing to do? And he said, it's just the right thing. We decided it's the right thing.
Sounds about right.
But that's the kind of insanity that was guiding policy in healthcare. I've never seen anything like it in my entire career. And you were sort of countering the winds that were blowing and taking all the punches at the time. Is there anything from that time that stands out for you that you're still angry about?
I'm not angry about you, and I'm glad. I don't want to carry around anger. Who wants to carry around anger? That's not a fun emotion to carry around. That being said, I certainly understand why many people would be angry, because the media during that time, because even before that time, when I was at UCLA, I was writing articles in the Wall Street Journal, getting a lot of flack for saying things like masks are not going to end this thing. Trying to force people to take new vaccines, trying to force everyone to do it is not going to yield a good outcome, because some people absolutely will absolutely refuse, and it will create more division. So I've been taking flack for a long time, and I would understand why people would be angry, because when you remember, in the depths of the belly of the pandemic, if you said something that was this far off whatever that mainstream message was, you were really crucified. Holy cow. You would think that, you were really, really crucified. But, it's not, I don't, yeah. So no anger. A lot of things stand out. I think that for many people in the scientific community who have similarly been saying things that were not the accepted narrative. Many of us have been really just been blown away by the abuse of scientific data and the misrepresentation of data to serve the purpose of controlling people's behavior and taking away their autonomy and really dehumanizing them. So, that will always stand out, that there were people that were willing to do that, and unfortunately that are still willing to do that.
I interviewed this PhD med student who was part of the chorus attacking people who dared to step 1 inch off the
Yeah.
party line, and he dared to kind of question a couple things. Then he got slammed, and he started thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe, what's going on here? And he completely came all the way around. And I wanted to interview him because I thought, well, what were you thinking before? He said, what I was thinking was I was afraid. So fear, number one. I was caught in the information that the press was pumping.
Yeah.
Fear, lack of full story. And I started thinking, well, why wouldn't you want to save lives? You must be something wrong with you that you want people to die. You must be wanting other people to die, which is why you're taking the position you're taking, which of course could never, ever be the reality. And it's quite the opposite. We could see what the consequences of the excesses were going to be, that they weren't going to save lives and they were going to harm people. There's no other reason to take the position you took. Another interesting thing, Joe, is I watched the symposium that Governor DeSantis put on with the Nobel laureates. If you remember that early on, he got a bunch of Nobel laureates together. And he said, explain to me why I should lock things down. And at the end of it, he read the literature. I talked to Jay Bhattacharya about it, who was there and providing some of the literature. And he said he devoured the literature. He understood it. And at the end, he says, I don't see any evidence that a lockdown is a solution. And they all went, yeah, that's our conclusion as well. Were you there then?
No, I was in Los Angeles, man. I read about it in the news because I think it was taken down by YouTube, but just such dark days, right? People, I mean, it's really profound, but at the same time, you see this in history, just whether you're talking about just the terrible things that humans have sometimes done to other humans in terms of dehumanizing them and taking away their rights that they absolutely have from God. And obviously some things have been just tremendous, just so much worse that humans have done to other humans, slavery, way before slavery, even in other countries and around the world, and in modern times too. But it is really phenomenal that people are willing that somehow you can convince a society of a truth that is, when society wakes up, it's just so obvious that it was. I mean, how did so many people decide to go along with that? So,
do you have a theory? It was odd to me too. I still don't get it. I still don't know what happened. I wonder if sometimes I think that sort of the Trump derangement created already this hysteria that was sort of bubbling around, and then it just went kaplowy with COVID.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I mean, I think that these kinds of things, because it really is profound, right? Because it's not that, people have an orientation toward good. Like there's, that is, yes, there are a few people that may not come out that way, but boy, you're talking like 0.001%. I mean, people have an orientation toward good. And when people, are convinced or led to believe that, well, this is what good looks like, when clearly good doesn't look like that. In this particular case, certainly the media and their messaging contributed. And I think also we are vulnerable to the extent that we are, disconnected from source and disconnected from ourselves and in each other. And that's one of the themes I write about in my book, because I personally had problems with that, very deep problems with that. Unfortunately, was able to, if I hadn't been able to transcend those things with the help of a Navy SEAL, actually, and my wife getting me to him, I'd be very angry. I'd be carrying all that stuff around. I think that unfortunately, when people are a little disconnected from the earth, from themselves, from love, and that connects us all, you can be vulnerable to messaging.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last time. That childhood trauma I believe we went through a pandemic of childhood trauma in the '90s and maybe the '80s, '90s, maybe even to the 2000s. It was just massively present. And that, when you look in history, there have been periods of history where that kind of thing has gone on. Pre-revolutionary France, for instance, and then fast forward 25 years, and the guillotines come out. And I actually wrote a chapter about that once that my publisher wouldn't let me put in a book I wrote because it was too speculative, they thought. But I thought, we will see guillotines. I didn't know about cancellation. I didn't know about social media. That became the public beheading. That became the guillotines. Before we take a little break here, a couple things I want to talk about very quickly. One was one thing I am angry about, and you tell me if I should still be angry about, is I believe it was, hang on, you tell me. I believe it was you that brilliantly put out the mobile unit with monoclonal antibodies when the government had bought the supply and was providing it to the states. And then they cut you off, as I recall, when you were in the middle of really doing the distribution work. And that was in the days of Alpha and Delta, when these monoclonal antibodies they just ended the illness. They kept people out of the hospital, but there was no public information about that. No other state was doing anything aggressive like you guys did. And then you got cut off, it seemed like to me, from the supply. Is that what happened?
More or less, and this was definitely all Governor DeSantis. Like I have no credit for this. So his leadership, how many doctors are there in this country, right? Hundreds of thousands. There are probably over 1 million doctors in this country, and hundreds and hundreds of health officials. And Governor DeSantis, of all of them, is the only one who says, well, let's provide a treatment option. And you remember back then, sometimes it was explicit and sometimes it was implicit, but there was clearly there was an aversion to providing people with treatment with monoclonal antibodies.
Doing anything. The steroids have been shown to be useful at that point. Fluvoxamine was on the table, and monoclonal antibodies clearly worked. I took them, and I went and I did a whole Instagram live about it every day, about how I was improving to try to help educate the public. And what I got back was, oh, you're special, you could afford it. Like, no, it's free. Government bought it. You can get it. And that's when Florida took off with it, I noticed. And then all of a sudden it all stopped. It was just disgusting. It was disgusting. That was the thing that could really help people.
Absolutely. Because the idea was, well, the only way we want people to get help is with vaccines or with like staying at home and masking. And, and that's why it was suppressed, right? Because it was always about controlling people's actions. And it's just, it's so gross. Like, I don't want to control anyone's actions.
It's gross.
I want you to do
I know.
whatever the hell you want to do. And, but unfortunately, the side that was the dominant party and the dominant force during the pandemic wanted you to do A, B, C, then skip over here and then go back here. It's gross. Like, why do you want to do that to human beings? Let them be.
I don't understand why they like doing that. And there seemed to be a group of people that liked following in line with that stuff, especially no matter how farcical or how far from useful it was, they seemed to like to do that. And that was very disturbing to see all that. And then to see people sort of, behaving like prison guards in certain situations, you sort of get a hint of how that can happen in a society in these historical.
Hello? What's your emergency?
Yeah.
I think I just saw my neighbor have a guest over at his house. Yeah. I think he's
that.
Can you come over?
Right. So Hitler Youth behavior, there was that. That was what the Hitler Youth was designed to do, those kinds of reporting. And then I remember somebody was screaming at me when I was trying to get the vaccine screaming at me, where are your papers? And I thought, oh my God, this is like a scene from a border crossing in a World War II movie. This is really something that this guy, a security guard at my hospital where I've been attending for 35 years, thought this is an okay way to interact with a senior physician. Okay, here we go. I thought, wow, does it feel good to him to do that? Why would anybody want to be that guy? But, we found a lot of them during this pandemic. Listen, I got to take a little break. We got to take a little break. I want to bring Dr. Kelly Victory in here. She's got a lot to ask you about, too. I do want to get a little bit into transgender stuff. I think you and I may disagree a little bit on that. And so that's kind of why I want to discuss it. I want to kind of probe a little bit. And because I've been in and around that community a long time, and I have some real specific concerns. And really beyond that, it's up to that community. We'll get into it. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, again, Florida Surgeon General, FL Surgeon Gen. You can follow him on Twitter there. Dr. Kelly Victory joins us after this quick break. I suspect you've seen Susan and I gushing over Paleo Valley products. We love the taste and how well they fit into a paleo-based nutrition regimen. They're delicious, and we use them for travel all the time. But there's more. We are huge fans as well of Paleo Valley's grass-fed bone broth protein. It comes in 3 flavors, unflavored, vanilla, and chocolate. It's a powder you can add to really anything. We add it to coffee literally every day. Smoothies, baked dishes, just hot water, dissolves really easily. The bone broth protein is made with 100% grass-fed and finished bones that are free from pesticides or antibiotics and are slow simmered to extract as much collagen as possible. As we age, collagen breaks down. That's what wrinkles are. And research shows that there are significant benefits to adding a collagen source in your diet. I don't think it's too much to say it's changed our lives. And Susan is now reporting that after drinking the bone broth for a few weeks, her hair is stronger and longer, and nails are stronger too. Try it for yourself. You can order at drdrew.com/paleovalley and use Dr. Drew at checkout to save an additional 15%. A lot of you have been asking for more information about how to counter the adverse effects of the spike protein from COVID infections and the COVID vaccine. The spike protein is not your friend. Let's just say that. So I'm glad we have the wellness company Spike Support Formula as a sponsor, especially since renowned internist and cardiologist Dr. Peter McCullough, who's also chief scientific officer of the wellness company, is one of its champions. There's some very intriguing research around nattokinase, which might be a way to take on the spike protein. Listen to this.
So start, if you would, with talking about nattokinase, how you got to that and where you see its application.
So with the viral infection or the vaccines, the spike protein stays within the body, and it's found in the heart, the brain, the vital organs, and it's causing problems. The Japanese have been using this for heart and vascular disease now for 20 years. It's safe. It is a form of a mild blood thinner that it dissolves the spike protein nearly completely.
Spike Support Formula is the only product on the market containing nattokinase, dandelion root, and a host of other antioxidants, all showing promise in helping you protect yourself and your family. To order this unique, specially formulated supplement, go to drdrew.com/TWC. That is drdrew.com/TWC. Use code DREW at checkout for 10% off today. President Trump recently issued a warning from his Mar-a-Lago home. Quote, "Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat, frankly, in 200 years. There are 3 reasons the central banks are dumping the U.S. dollar: inflation, deficit spending, and our insurmountable national debt. The fact is, there is one asset that has withstood famine, wars, political and economic upheaval dating back to biblical times: gold. And you can own it in a tax shelter retirement account with the help of Birch Gold. That's right, Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k, maybe from a previous employer, into an IRA in gold. And the best part, you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just visit birchgold.com/Drew for your free info kit. They'll hold your hand through the entire process. Think about this. When currencies fail, gold is a safe haven. How much more time does the dollar have? Birch Gold has an A+ rating with Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. I do not give financial advice, and previous performance is no guarantee of future performance. Visit birchgold.com/Drew to get your free info kit on gold. That is birchgold.com/DREW. Some platforms have banned the discussion of controversial topics. If this episode ends here, the rest of the show is available at drdrew.tv.
There's nothing in medicine that doesn't boil down to a risk-benefit calculation. It is the mandate, public health, to consider the impact of any particular mitigation scheme on the entire population. This is uncharted territory, Drew.
And we welcome Dr. Kelly Victory with Dr. Joseph Ladapo, Florida Surgeon General. And Kelly, if you remember before the mics heated up today, before Dr. Ladapo joined us, we were going over some of the data, the deaths per 100,000 in Florida versus California and Texas, and how well Florida had done. And Caleb, I'm going to give you some shit about this right now. Caleb, who I thought was up on most things, had bought the narrative that somehow Florida was behind because of Dr. Ladapo's policies. No, not only did he not harm children, he kept businesses open. They had better outcome in a state filled with high-risk elderly people. So, Kelly, I will hand it over to you at this point. But first, Caleb, maybe issue Dr. Ladapo an apology.
Yes, I believed the hype. I didn't understand. And I looked at the map earlier today and I had to ask both Dr. Drew and Kelly, am I missing something here? Because I thought that I read a lot of stuff about Florida getting this all wrong because they did it very different. But the numbers seem to show that they're doing
They did
really
it all
good.
right, Caleb.
They did it all right.
Right.
Oh,
Amazing,
Caleb,
amazing.
here you are letting the data get in the way of a good storyline. Dr. Joe, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us. As we're talking, every day that goes by, the data make it more and more clear that under your leadership and the leadership of Ron DeSantis, Florida clearly was doing something right. And I truly appreciate that. At the risk of beating a dead horse, if you will, go back for a minute to this issue of accountability. It's one thing as frustrating as it is for me, for my non-scientific neighbors or family members to have bought this hype hook, line, and sinker from the CDC and the FDA and the powers that be. But you and I and Drew are physicians. You and I share a common background in public health. What the heck happened to our colleagues? In your estimation, as you said, there are hundreds of thousands of physicians in this country, and with rare exception, they bought into it. I have said from the beginning, I didn't say what I said from the beginning because I'm a good guesser. I didn't, talk about the fallacy of masks being, social distancing, the danger of lockdowns because I had a crystal ball or was somehow prescient. We've known this stuff for decades. What happened, in your estimation, to our colleagues?
It's always a pleasure to see Dr. Victory, and we go actually, even though we didn't have a relationship that we were both aware of early on, I still remember being in LA and seeing you interviewed on that San Diego news station. So that was fun to hear you during the pandemic and offering sense and sanity. That's such a great question, and what happened is still happening. And I actually one component of it, I think, is Dr. Vinay Prasad, who you may know,
Sure.
Brilliant guy, thoughtful guy, and really cares. You think he would be a monster because he's not supporting the mask and all this kind of stuff. And great guy. And something he said that resonates with me is that one component is that docs, medical students, they don't get good training with data interpretation and learning how to read studies, and most importantly, learning both how to interpret studies and learning how their interpretations are potentially being manipulated by either intentionally or unintentionally influenced by study authors. I don't know if you guys have read Dr. Marcia Angel's, former New England Journal of Medicine editor, his book, The Truth About Drug Companies.
Right.
But it's just, it's fascinating, right? These vaccines are manufactured, Pfizer, Moderna, Pfizer, they have a terrible history of misleading. And it's not something unique to Pfizer, it's all of them, right?
Yes.
Vioxx, that was Merck. They knew data on the increased risk of heart attacks and fatal heart attacks. That was present at the time that their New England Journal of Medicine paper was published, the paper that their drug reps then went around to thousands, if not tens of thousands of clinics in the United States to get doctors to prescribe their drug. So it's just, and that's how they behave, right? They will go as far as they are allowed to go.
Can I let's drill into that. Let's drill into Vioxx a little bit since it came up. You guys don't mind, because I was aware, I used Vioxx a lot back in the day. I don't know if you guys were practicing when Vioxx was around. It was one of the most extraordinary anti-inflammatories of all time.
Right.
And I was aware there was risk from it, and I would inform patients about it, and I used it only in people. I mean, you got to remember, we think about some of the incredibly dangerous anti-inflammatories. I'm thinking of one, I can't remember the name of it anymore. It's just not used because it's so dangerous. We use dangerous things as physicians. Pfizer's problem was that when the FDA said explain this, they tried to explain it away. And it was, if I remember, it was only it was 7 deaths. And when my patients were withdrawn from Vioxx, I have patients that I follow to this day that have never been the same since that medicine was removed. Now, would they have died of a heart attack? Very unlikely. Very unlikely. So we have this weird thing in this country where we go from one side of the boat to the other. And I'm not trying to whitewash what Pfizer did. They should have been just open and honest, said this is dangerous, there's some problems with this drug, and here's the risk reward analysis, and only when it's really worth it should doctors be thinking about using this medication. They didn't. They over-marketed it, and that's part of the problem too.
Yeah, but I think your Dr. Joe's point, I think your point is well taken, that the drug companies, as Dr. Joe is saying, their entire mandate is to make money. They aren't really looking out. They have a long and storied history of covering things up, of being less than fully honest. And now when you add that component to the fact that they fundamentally own the research journals, our storied journals, the Lancet, the BMJ, this is a recipe for disaster. And so I think that Dr. Joe is right, that the way the pharmaceutical companies have been allowed to act and to get away with things, and that fact that physicians have been unwittingly trusting of them, has probably
or
really
duped
contributed.
or duped. That's the bigger problem. Duped, and then the FDA is going to rescue us from that. It's like, no, come on. There's so many layers to this because the FDA and the pharmaceuticals are the same people.
Sure, right. With the funding of the drug reviews, and I would say I totally hear you. I totally hear you, Dr. Drew, about patients who benefited. Right, it's not impossible. I mean, it is effective, but I'd say 2 things. Right. So one thing is, to the best of my knowledge, none of the clinical trials where it was tested showed it doing any better than other anti-inflammatory drugs. I mean, I think they were compared to sugar tablets or something like that. But it was
compared to Celebrex.
Okay,
it was head against Celebrex sometimes. Yeah.
Okay. And go ahead. Yeah.
No,
the point is the data was shitty. The data was shitty. It was shitty, and then it was whitewashed. And that's what we're talking about here. What I'm sort of adding the nuance to is that patients get hurt whichever way it cuts. You know what I mean? When they do shitty things with the data, doctors can't use things that might be, worth it. They're a little you can't use it because they were so duplicitous and I'm saying both sides. FDA runs to cover their ass, and the Pfizer tries to pretend there's nothing here, nothing to see. Both are, I think, wrong. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah, I hear you. So I'll add something to that. So what I would say is that I totally agree, because the issue is informed consent, people having information, doctors and patients, about what the benefit risk profile, which was impossible unless you were a doctor and you went and you looked up the data that Pfizer submitted to the FDA. But I would say the second thing, though, is that I think my impression is I think it's a good idea to hold drug companies to pretty high standards, because it's not
for sure.
Like Vioxx, it's not the only COX-1 selective anti-inflammatory drug. There are others, and they're going to have different safety profiles. But if they can get away with not investing more, with spending less and making comparable profit,
of course they will.
That's what
of course they will.
At least that's what they've done historically.
And I think just to get back to the original, the reason I'm pressing a little bit on with regard to your opinion on what happened to our colleagues is because I think if we don't figure out how this happened, it will absolutely happen again. How you
Yeah.
ended up, it is one thing for the lay public to buy into something that isn't so. But when you get the entire medical community, with rare exception, to go along, you really have to ask why. Now, if you look at public health, and I'd love your insights into this. It seems to me, I trained, I don't have a master's in public health, but I did extensive training at the Harvard School of Public Health and went through a specialized program there. It seems to me over time that what they are doing is focusing far more on cranking out social justice warriors, people who are focused far more on equity, for example, than on things truly related to public health, not focused on informed consent and patient choice and patient advocacy. They're really more socially oriented than anything else. And I think that probably has led some of this, because the people at the helm, insofar as they were trained in public health, I think lost sight of the real mandate of public health, which is to consider the impact of these different mitigation schemes, whether it's masking or school closures or lockdowns, on the entire population, the vast majority of whom were at a de minimis risk from COVID in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. And Dr. Victory, yeah, it'll totally happen. It's actually still happening. So to just use I think a very pertinent example, Florida, we looked at public health data here. We found a signal for an increased cardiac death risk after the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines, only in young men. Was the data perfect? Was the analysis perfect? No. But was the finding like only in this group? Yeah. Instead of the very clear plausibility of that, given the, both the clinical and the subclinical myocarditis and people who die and never make it to the hospital, never have an autopsy after these vaccines, people, it's like you're attacking their mom, right? In the terms of the way they defend this.
Yeah.
And, and since that time, a study was published in Nature that it was a similar study, 12 to 28-year-olds in men. And that study, lo and behold, only in young males, there was a 70% increased risk of cardiac death. They wrote it off in the study, but are you kidding me? Lose your religion, right? Lose your religion with this worshiping at mRNA COVID-19 altar. And open your eyes, right? And so it's still with it, right? They haven't, it's hard for people to lose their religion sometimes. And it's totally still with us. It's terrible, Dr. Victory, that it is.
Are you guys seeing a more stroke in addition to more heart issues, more cardiac events? I've suddenly seen a lot of stroke in young people, and not used to seeing that.
Right.
Anybody?
Yeah, we haven't analyzed that, but it is a concern. It's something that's shown up in some of the safety studies. Obviously, it's all been whitewashed by the FDA. It's like, no, well, we did this other study and it went away. The signal wasn't present. So you find it in one study, you don't find it in the other study, and voila, you have your answer. It's not present.
That was the Vioxx strategy.
Right.
That's the point.
Exactly.
That was the Vioxx strategy.
Exactly.
They're bringing it back for the Vioxx strategy for the vaccine.
No, right. You got 3,000 studies showing that ivermectin works, and 6 that say it doesn't. So those are the 6 that get published. People focus a lot on what you guys didn't do in Florida that the rest of the world was doing. You didn't mandate masks. You didn't shut down schools and churches. You didn't, really push the lockdown theory or whatever. Talk a little bit about what you did do. Drew brought up the concept of the monoclonal antibodies, but what about the other things? The rest of us were living through therapeutic nihilism. We couldn't prescribe ivermectin. We couldn't use hydroxychloroquine. We couldn't, it was this ridiculous. I've never lived through this in medicine, where I had pharmacists refusing to fill legitimate prescriptions that I was writing. Florida, is my understanding at least, was different. Talk about what you did do that may have contributed to your having these better outcomes than the rest of us.
Well, what we did do was use a lot of common sense. And that went from everything from letting doctors prescribe what they thought was best to prescribe for their patients and their clinical judgment, rather than what you saw in California and many other parts of the country, where people were being disciplined by boards because they were prescribing a medication that someone else didn't agree with. I mean, the person went to med school like you. Like, why can't they've got a medical license like you? Let them exercise their judgment. And so we were very explicit about that, and we voiced that we support doctors taking care of their patients in the ways that they think are best. Something else that we did is we let kids stay in school, even when someone next to them had COVID in the classroom and breathed, took two breaths on them when they were walking past each other in the hallway. And we were, we were very explicit about that. And we were just nixing every little sneaky, subvertive, ugly, nasty, desperate attempt to somehow get masks on little kids. I mean, what the hell is the obsession with that? Leave those people, they're just obsessed with it. These fires in the Northeast, certainly it's too bad, because that is definitely, you're in California. We used to live in California. The air quality is terrible with fires. You see it again. It's like, pre-pandemic, I did not see one story about an N95 when it was like, get out of there, right? Move, try to avoid bad air. But here's, let's write articles about masks, and let's talk more about the masks, and let's give the masks out and wear them. I mean, it's like this obsession with these masks. Gee, what in the world is?
Yeah, exactly. No, I used to say to people at cocktail parties, I'd say to fellow physicians, I'd say, I sat next to you in virology class. Like, what the hell happened to you? Masks. Like, are you kidding? You're removing every other chair in your waiting room? Honestly? Like, oh my God, it's just crazy. But I was a psychologist before I was a physician. And I have said from the beginning, I think it's going to be a good decade or more before we understand exactly the damage that we did to kids as a result of this pandemic response. In Florida, do you have any sense for, the rest of the country is kids have lost 3+ years of academic achievement, reading, math, underprivileged kids, minority kids really took it on the chin, suffered mercilessly because of this, and are woefully behind academically. Do you have a sense in Florida for how kids have fared, because of the more lenient or less restrictive approach that you guys took?
Yeah, much better. So the Harvard has a center for something like education policy. I don't remember the name, but they performed an analysis of maybe every state, but several states, and Florida was among them. And their findings about overall changes in loss in educational milestones and performance for students, it was much more favorable in Florida, and they state that in their results. And and it makes sense. In Florida, there were some counties there's some school districts that were sort of trying to take more of the Faucian route with their approach to education, and Governor DeSantis was very strong about opposing that and really supporting parents' right to get their kids in school. And the data show it.
Yeah. Well, good for you, because I'll tell you, as I said, it's going to be a long time. It's not just the fact that kids didn't learn to read or to do math or whatever else. It's everything else that happens in school, which is, the fact that teachers are the ones who largely pick up on kids' hearing and vision issues. There are lots of things that really we are going to see unprecedented numbers of, in kids as a result of that lockdown. What was your take on, you notice as the pandemic, I'm sure it wasn't lost to you, as the pandemic started to wind down and they just couldn't fuel the flames of fear longer, first rolled out monkeypox. They tried monkeypox as the next one, and when that failed miserably, they tried Marburg virus for a while. They were kind of getting excited about that. Did you guys even bat an eye in the great state of Florida to those faux-demics?
Well, we prepare. I mean, we had monkeypox. Pardon me. We had monkeypox cases here, and we had the antiviral, and we also had the Genius vaccine. I think
Yeah.
it doesn't actually have great data in
Yeah.
terms of clinical trials, which is unfortunate. But yeah, we had that available here, and we responded by focusing on providing people with access who wanted any of those products, and with education. As you remember, early on, I mean, it was you knew pretty early on that it was, fortunately, I mean, no one wants to have the poxes from monkeypox and the skin lesions, but fortunately it was not and there was pain was also an issue, but in terms of mortality and long-term consequence, fortunately it was very extremely limited. So that was very real for us, and we monitored the epidemiology of transmission in Florida. But you're right. I mean, it is really fascinating. These forces, FDA, CDC, the media, they love to gin up. They love to gin up fear, and it's kind of what Dr. Drew and I were talking about. You're less susceptible to that stuff when you're spiritually intact. And so I think that's a great goal. That's a great goal for folks to aspire to. So you don't have to worry about their silly games, and you can see them like right when they're coming.
The last statistics that I read with regard to the exodus from healthcare, of healthcare professionals, not just physicians, but also nurses and ancillary healthcare people, physical therapists and technicians, was somewhere in the range, it was almost 500,000 people left during the pandemic. I'm guessing that Florida fared again a lot better because it was such a welcoming place for people to practice medicine. And you guys probably even picked up a few. I know at one point Governor DeSantis was incentivizing first responders who are losing their jobs if they refuse to get vaccinated in states like New York to come on down. We'll happily take you. Do you have any sense for whether or not people did move to Florida in order to practice unfettered medicine, or to at least be able to practice without fear of losing their jobs because they didn't want to take the jabs?
Yeah, it totally happened. And I wish I could give you an exact number. I want to say we've got maybe, I don't know, 60,000 MDs with a license here. It's MDs and ODs, maybe. I've got but yeah, that totally happened. And, it was beyond just doctors and nurses. And other people definitely moved here just to be able to have more freedom. And of course, Florida is a place where it's a second home for many people, like New Yorkers and others in the Northeast. But we did have a lot of people moving here, including in healthcare, and it shows in the real estate prices. Unfortunately, it's like someone just turned the ignition on when starting in maybe mid. I think you could actually tell sort of the prices started to really climb. I want to say in maybe mid to late 2020, because people were with their feet and moving down here. Wish they'd slow down so that we could just on the real estate market if you're looking to buy a house. But
You guys,
there's a mess.
my producer has suggested we take some calls from Twitter Spaces. So those of you that want to ask Dr. Ladapo any questions, you just push the button in the lower left-hand corner there, and I will bring you up to the podium, and you will stream out on multiple platforms. Yeah, it's there's one last thing we left out of the conversation about what our peers did. One thing I was not aware of that became clear immediately during the pandemic was how many of our peers are employed. They're employees. And when their employer said, stand down, don't do anything, they dutifully did. And that was, frankly, a miscarriage of their sacred duty. And it was a kind of a disgusting display, really. Go home until you can't breathe was the instruction.
Well, Yeah,
beyond.
I do think that is a huge issue, and my friend and colleague Kat Lindley and I have spoken about it. She's really pushing this concept of physicians becoming independent again. Physicians, there is too much. It is the pharmacy, pharmaco medical insurance government complex that is controlling the practice of medicine right now. You not only need to get big pharma out of it, the insurance companies
Really,
are
and
part of the
Kelly,
problem as well.
oh, for sure, it really started there, and then the physician role is really, when you really look at the physician role in these complexes you're talking about, is to absorb liability. That's really the one thing we retain, is complete liability for everything that happens. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
All right, so those of you that are on Twitter Spaces, they're kind of lining up here. I'm going to get to it in just a second. But before, let me bring somebody right on up here as Theodore, I think is the name. And we'll see what the question is. And don't forget, after you click through, you got to unmute yourself in the lower left-hand corner there as well. There you are. What can we do for you?
Well, I'm really concerned about suspending informed consent. And I mean, I was trained in school that couldn't happen. And it seems like, at the very least, an overreach, but I thought it was illegal.
I'm sorry,
say it again. I don't think we heard the whole question.
I think he said
state it again.
He said to suspend informed consent. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I thought that was illegal. I thought it could not happen.
I'll let you.
And I'm surprised that it happened. Wasn't it at the very least an overreach? I thought it was illegal to suspend informed consent.
It's illegal in the sense that if you don't do it, the liability that you incur is massive, I would say. But let's recognize that informed consent is still something. While I did believe I could give informed consent to my 65-plus-year-old patients about the mRNA vaccine, I did not feel I could give a 30-year-old male informed consent because I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't read the data. And let's remind ourselves, let's take my 75-year-old patients and above, who I believe I helped with the mRNA vaccine, to continue to boost at this point. There's no informed consent for that. We have no data for that. We are strictly reaching in the dark. Now, part of informed consent is sharing that with your patient. That is sort of a means of informed consent. What do you guys say?
I agree. And I know that it's a professional duty, and to which a person would be, as Dr. Drew said, be open to liability for not providing it. And I actually want to just acknowledge one other point there, which a friend made apparent to me, and I just hadn't connected the dots until he said it. That in fact, the censoring of opposing data and opposing interpretations of that data absolutely was an ethical violation, because it totally robbed people of the opportunity of the relationship of informed consent. You cannot be informed if there are substantial interpretations, substantial beliefs, scientific beliefs about a treatment that are being suppressed. It's impossible. It's not possible to provide to receive informed consent in that arena, and that's a fact.
I agree, and I would just add on to that. You're exactly right that informed consent is predicated on the concept of the risk-benefit calculation, and if you don't understand both sides of that risk-benefit calculation, honestly, if you don't, and they way oversold the risk of COVID to people. We knew from the beginning that children, healthy people under the age, frankly, of 50 were at a very low risk from COVID. So they overestimated the risk, and they far estimated the benefit of the injections. Okay. They said that they would start. Remember early on, if you take this shot, everybody from Rachel Maddow to Anthony Fauci told you, if you take this shot, you won't get COVID. Okay. So when you censor people who are saying other things, like people like me, people, who are shut down, kicked off of social media, couldn't say, no, you're not understanding the risk side and you're not understanding the benefit side. If you don't have that, you cannot give informed consent, in my opinion.
That's right. That's right. Listen, you guys, I just saw a little video with Walensky being interviewed in a House session, and she is still saying that people who got the vaccine and COVID didn't transmit. She's saying that out loud in sworn testimony, and I don't know that I think that's a new video I just saw. Because I saw earlier Marjorie Taylor Greene asking her which pharma company she was going to work for after she left the CDC. I laughed out loud when I saw that. But there's a weird unwillingness to come into reality by a lot of people, both on the mask front. I hear the White House is bringing masking back, and on the issues around the efficacy of the vaccine. It's kind of uncanny, and the cognitive biases the cognitive dissonance is really alive and well amongst our peers. I think that's another layer to this whole thing, Joe.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, many layers, and I'm with you there. It's just so like, someone pinch me, wake me up. This
Right.
can't be
You're
happening.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right. I'm upside down. Yeah, exactly right. Okay, Ligert, you're on the speaking podium here. Go ahead. Or Liger T. Yes.
It's actually Bill.
All right, Bill. All
The name is
right, good.
actually
All I
Bill.
got is what you put there, what they show me.
Yeah, I know. That's part of my last name. Anyway, I'm calling from BC, Canada. And I have to tell you, if you want to be in a place that's the opposite of Florida, it's going to be, or even California, we're even worse than there. It's BC, Canada. We are still in 2020. We still have vaccine mandates for healthcare workers. We're still vaccinating little kids. It's absolutely insane here. And, I don't know what what we can do about it, but I mean, God help us. It's just awful. It really is. They have not.
Well, at least, Bill, you have a dreamy prime minister, so you got what you asked for.
Okay. Yeah. We have that, all right, Mr. Woke, the wokest of the woke. And BC is even woker than he is. It really is. The COVID thing, you just can't even imagine. They've made it illegal to protest at. They're putting on clinics in elementary schools to jab kids, and they've made it illegal to be anywhere near that, protesting, that kind of thing. Just crazy.
Wow.
Well,
it's a dream you want to wake up from, right? Dr. Trudeau.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You guys, man. I remember some videos from Canada. I think that Canada was pretty hyped with the whole dial the cops if someone's breaking curfew or bringing someone in there. At least parts of Canada, from what I saw.
Are they allowed to fly into the country yet without a vaccine?
Oh, in Canada?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Still...
I don't know. I put Bill back in the audience there. Want me to get him back?
Go back for a second. I do want to say, because that point, Dr. Joe, about weaponizing your neighbors, turning people into the brown shirts. This was really right out. I mean, not too much. It is not hyperbole to compare this to what happened in Nazi Germany. You are turning your neighbors into the brown shirts. I remember it well. They're saying, rat out your neighbor if they have, the 4th of July barbecue and cars show up for the cookout. From a societal perspective, the damage that was done, independent of physical harm that was done to people by the lack of treatment for COVID, the societal damage, the division that happened, far worse than we've had anything from a race perspective. The division that happened in this country over whether or not you believed in masks or you didn't, whether you were, pro-vaccine or you weren't, whether you believed in the lockdowns or not, I think it is so heinous. What has happened. I'm not sure we've ever had a time in our country's history where we were as divided as we are over this COVID response.
Well, actually, I'm really glad you raised that, Dr. Victory, because it's fascinating and sinister, the ability of leadership forces, media forces, other forces, even religious forces, to get people to see other human beings as being the enemy, something,
Hmm.
an entity that is subhuman or not deserving of the
Right.
things that humans are all deserving of, is such a powerful tool that that we have seen repeated to the detriment of everyone, for just throughout modern history. You shared some examples there. Sadly, we're actually, I know Dr. Drew mentioned the transgender you know issue, or the discussions happening around transgenderism, and sadly, there's even some of it happening there, in that and I there's just from what there's no doubt that some of the forces behind the the exponential increase, it are not biologic. There's
Correct.
no doubt that
Correct.
they're beyond biological forces, that have driven the growth. But those forces, while they are not for the benefit of of human beings or the benefit of health, they have sometimes made it hard for people to distinguish between the forces and the individuals, who might report or say that they experience gender dysphoria, or whatever it is that they are experiencing. And unfortunately, some of that is happening now, and it really saddens my heart, that it's we've gone from what almost all parents support, which is not sexualizing children. I don't care if you're white, black, old, young, gay, straight, doesn't matter. I mean, parents, universally, they don't want kids sexualized. They don't want kids to be exposed to forces that are not appropriate for little children, and the innocence and the beauty of little children. The parents don't want that, but unfortunately, we kind of, instead of remaining there, it's become, for many people, something that is just many people around the country, something that is targeted toward the individuals.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It's actually the very same. It's actually the very same energy, the same entity that made vaccinated people say that unvaccinated people weren't worthy of their keeping their jobs, or feeding their families,
Right.
or coming into a restaurant, and they deserve it. And oh, he or she brought it on him or herself when they were fired from that job. It's actually, it's the same thing. It's just like, we have to stop allowing ourselves to be manipulated into seeing other human beings as being something other than other human beings, other
Yeah.
representations of God.
Well, and I think that that's really what leads me to believe that there are evil forces at work here, because a house divided cannot stand. That
Oh, yeah.
is this purposeful attempt to divide us. They don't really care along what lines. As long as we are all fighting, you cannot band together. And I will also say that there is no carve out. There was no caveat in the Constitution, and certainly the Bill of Rights, for a pandemic. So the idea that we would somehow put our God-given rights, and again, this is back to your point, people have got to remind themselves of our founding, to remind themselves of the very, the fundamental constructs of this country, which is that we're based on the idea that we have rights that were imbued to us by God, not by our government, and therefore they cannot be taken away by our governments. And I think it's really fundamentally, we've gotten to this place because people have lost sight of that or never knew it in the first place. God knows we don't even teach it anymore, I don't think, in school. So we have an entire generation or two of people who don't even know what the foundation of this country really was about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And those men were, boy, gosh, talk about being, chosen by God. I mean, just really blessed creatures. Those men that founded this country: George Washington, Ben Franklin, John Adams, with whatever, with the, with his flaws, and
Right.
and Thomas Jefferson. I mean, it's so funny. It's like, instead of, people want to focus on their shortcomings. So and so owned slaves. First of all, and it's messed up, because it's like, it's kind of silly, because how the heck would you have done, 300
Right.
years ago?
Well, everybody believes they would have been the one. Everybody believes that. They also believe if they've been in Germany, they would have not gone along with things. They believe that they would have not. Everyone, that's the narcissism of the present moment. That is presentism, full on.
Never mind just the wisdom of their work
Right.
and their ability the courage they exhibited,
Right.
right? We, hang together, we surely will all hang,
Right.
hang separately.
Yeah.
Never
Right.
mind that courage and that brilliance and the wisdom. Never mind that, so and so, owned slaves, or so and so, said this about women, or, I mean, it's just, it's like, no, buddy,
Yeah.
you're missing.
Yeah.
You're missing the
Yeah.
lesson here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm cognizant of the clock here winding down, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you spending an hour plus of your time, given all you've got on your plate there in Florida.
Yes, we are so grateful. So grateful, and
Yeah.
we admire you. We support you. I just think you've I think you've been calling it right. You've been calling strikes and balls, and you've been a good umpire, and that's, and your instincts are good. Your understanding is good, and you've been trying to make good decisions on behalf of patients and the people you're responsible for there in Florida. So we appreciate you very, very much, and appreciate you coming on with us.
Yep, the results are unassailable, Dr. Joe. So as my
Results are
grandmother
the
used to say,
results.
the proof is in the pudding, and and the great state of Florida has you to thank for it. So thank
And
you.
let's
Thanks
go
for
get the
doing
book. Let's everybody get the book. Transcend Fear. Did I get the name right? Is that correct? Let's put it up there again.
There you go.
There it is. Transcend Fear. Let's get the book. Read about it.
I gotta thank
I
Governor
suspect
DeSantis.
you
I
will
wouldn't
agree
be
with
here
most of it.
without him.
I'm sorry.
No,
Say again.
Fair enough.
Like I said, I have to thank Governor DeSantis. I wouldn't have the opportunity to, to be in a position of leadership without him. So,
Yep.
I'm
Well,
very
we
How
thank
did he,
him
just
for
out of
being-
curiosity, how did he find you, Joe? How did he find you? Did he was reading your Wall Street Journal articles, or?
Actually, you mentioned Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and I've never asked him, but my understanding is, and we have a great relationship, Governor DeSantis. He's very kind. His heart is totally in the right place. There's no other governor I would work for in this country. Well, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, apparently, they were looking for a new guy, and apparently he recommended me, and maybe few other people recommended me, and then I got a phone call, and then I talked to my wife, and she said, "Do it."
Moving to Florida, everybody. Last time you were here, I swore I was going to come to Tallahassee and visit. I really need to make an effort to do that. So I'm gonna try to come by in the fall, at least shake your hand. I really want to do that.
Well, I'll tell you, truth to tell, I'm part of the same big group that you were part of, the big COVID group with Jay Bhattacharya and Harvey Reish and Peter McCullough and all of us, and we were all super excited that you got tapped for this, and then at the same time bummed because you dropped off of our group, and we said we've just lost a great contributor to our group, but everyone was cheering for you, and you've gone on and obviously taken Florida, to a great place through this pandemic, and I'm sure you've got lots more leadership to share with them. So again, we appreciate you taking the time out to join us and share your wisdom, and I'm sure we'll
We will
keep in touch.
let you go.
Let's do it again.
We'll let you go so you can go back to your job. Thank you so much. And Kelly, I'm going to keep you. Dr. Joseph Ladapo, everybody. Kelly, do you have a few minutes to take maybe a couple more calls? There are a bunch of hands up here. Want me to try to do that?
Caleb has a heart out in
2.35
seconds. So you can take
Caleb has a heart out.
5 minutes.
So
I can do 5 minutes.
I can do five. I can do 5 as well.
5 minutes. All right, let me. This is Shine 5. I don't know what that means, but you guys with your screen names, I'm left with just that. Really, there you are. Shine, what's up?
Just a question. Has there any? I come on to listen to your show a lot. I've heard some talk regarding vaccinated versus unvaccinated. Like if you need blood for surgery. Has anybody had talks about that? About blood banks of having separate blood available for people who are vaxxed or unvaxxed? I'm kind of concerned about that.
Well, I think you
are
rightly concerned. Yeah, I think you are rightly concerned about it. I've been speaking about this and raising the alarm flag about the security of the blood supply as a result of this, because clearly there are gobs of spike proteins in the blood of people who have been vaccinated. Unfortunately, the Red Cross
COVID too, right? I mean, just COVID's what was spike too. You got a bunch of virus around.
Yes, but theoretically, if somebody's sick with COVID, they're not going in and donating blood. And those spike proteins clear quickly. So that is not the case with people who've been vaccinated. They have those spike proteins for a long, long time, upwards of a year, it now appears. So the reality is the Red Cross is not differentiating between the blood of people who are vaccinated and those who are not. So there's no way to know. I have suggested to people that if you were going to have an elective surgery where you thought there was a high likelihood that you might need blood, that you can certainly go in and bank blood of your own ahead of time. That has to be done significantly in advance of the procedure. And, if you're going in for a knee replacement,
everybody should do that.
Blood.
You should,
but you're not.
But you should do they will let them do that sometimes. I've had both hip and knee patients give a unit, so they'll let you.
Yes, you can. Chances of you needing blood in one of those orthopedic surgeries is very, very low. And the biggest issue, I guess, is that the times you most likely need blood products is when you've had a traumatic issue, in which case you haven't had the opportunity to donate in advance. But I think your concerns are legitimate. There has been talk about creating a parallel blood supply, like the Red Cross, specifically for unvaccinated blood. To this date, I am unaware that it's actually happened, but there's been quite a bit of discussion about it.
Kelly, we have used our time. Caleb has a heart out today, so I would.
He's going on vacation.
I know. He's on
Caleb's first vacation.
Well, all of my friends, whose relationships survived the pandemic, they're all getting married this year. So there's so many weddings we're flying out to. This is the last wedding of the year. So yeah, everyone else should be married.
Well, safe travels, and we will see you. We will see you next week. I know next Wednesday we have Dick Russell, who wrote the new biography of Bobby Kennedy Jr., coming to talk about his insights into Robert Kennedy. And then we've got Tom Renz coming at the end of the month for a repeat visit. Super excited about that.
Very excited about that. It'll be interesting to hear what's new. Yep. And Mark Morano on the 20th, and we're working on the 22nd. So, Kelly, we will see you a week from tomorrow. We are out the rest of this week. Be back again Tuesday at 3 p.m. We appreciate all you all on the Twitter Spaces, as well as we're watching the restream of the Rumble Rants. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Caleb, for taking a vacation, because that means I get a vacation too.
Tell a friend if Susan's going to Orange County.
I'm in vacation mode. It's summer. I hate to say it, but
well, fair enough. We did Gay Pride in Palm Springs over the weekend. We had a nice time. But tell a friend about this if you're learning stuff. Go look at some of the previous interviews we've done. I think if you kind of roll back and look at some of the interviews we've been privileged enough to have here, you will learn a lot. And you may not agree with everything, but you will learn a ton. So do tell a friend, and we will continue to
check out our sponsor page on drdrew.com and help support the show by supporting our sponsors who are dedicated to the show now. Also, the nattokinase, which removes the spike protein. I take it every day. It's not hurting me. No
we
side
are
effects.
very fortunate to have Paleo Valley and with some products that we really stand behind. So we're very.
Wait, we have a new one. We didn't produce today.
Not
but
yet.
Is
we
that
have,
the dental?
Next week.
It's coming though.
Nope. Is that the dental
and
stuff? Is
also one more thing. I was thinking about this today. We have locals.com/Dr. Drew too. If anybody wants to get an email that sort of gives you an idea of what the show is going to be, join Locals. We send out an email.
And if you have
every
ideas
day.
of what we can develop Locals into, we are open to ideas.
Yeah, we don't do live streaming there. If we could live stream there too, it'd be great. But I don't think they do restream yet. But that's an affiliation with Rumble. So, but I think it's like $7 a month or whatever, and I send out the blast out the emails there. So if you want to know what's coming up, I'll send it out every day.
All right. Again, we appreciate you all supporting this, supporting us, being around for this conversation. It's very interesting. I've learned a ton. And the thought bubble over my head 3 years ago that started with what is going on? Why are we? What the hell is happening here? It's coming clearer and clearer all the time. So hopefully you will gain some clarity as well, so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past. We'll see you next Tuesday at 3 o'clock Pacific time.
Ta-ta.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help. When we were young, we were interested in having a good time.
Yeah.
Enjoying ourselves and socializing.
Yeah.
That's been washed out. And that's starting to come back.
Well, what I will say, that what I'm noticing, because I also have a 12-year-old stepson, and you would think 12 going on 13, he's going to want to be on social media. He doesn't want, he sees like the negativity of the phone.
Oh my God.
He's not addicted to it at all.
Good.
He's like, I don't want any of that. And I was like, why don't you want to social media? I swear to God, he goes, because I see what it does to you and mom. I was like, whoa, that's pretty powerful. And I was like, you're right. He was like, you guys are like zombies on that thing. I was like, holy, but that actually gave me like a hope, because I was like, hopefully him and his friends, they don't want, he was riding his bike the other day, and we as the parents were like, wow, look at like a group of kids riding bikes. You don't see that anymore. And it's like, what a sick world that we live in. You don't see that anymore.
Yes, bring it back. Bring it local, small, interpersonal.
I want to go all the way back to the 1700s rules.
Let's
Let's
go.
start fucking burning people at the stake.
No, let's leave that part out.